Hey everyone, welcome to a drive-by review of another gimbal from Feiyu. Previously I had looked at their MGV2 and this is a serious upgrade, the a2000. And not only that, I have the expansion pack that has all of the bars that allows you to hold it in that nice comfortable ergonomic position. Now the nice thing about this is, unlike the MGV2, it can hold a lot more weight and still function very well as a gimbal, over 2 times more weight, which is fantastic because I have just picked up a full-frame Sony, the Sony a7 III. I pre-ordered it and had it really early. Now that's a phenomenal camera, but it requires a little bit more from the gimbal because it is heavier and larger than the a6000 I've been using for most of my videography. Now without further ado, let's bust into the package and see what the a2000 has in store for us. Throw on the a7 III and see how it performs. Here we go. As you guys can see in that video, it's extremely smooth, and that was with the a7 III full-frame Sony camera on top of this puppy. Right now this is the a6000, and as you can see, it does phenomenally well. It's really gonna be way more than you need for the a6000, whereas the previous one I reviewed, the MGV2, that was all it could do, and you couldn't even put big lenses on. So with the weight bearing up to, I believe, 5,000 grams or 5.5 pounds of weight this is rated for, it's fantastic for anything that's full frame with a smaller lens. And that's fine for me because I'm gonna be using probably mostly prime lenses when I'm doing gimbal work. Whereas, you know, something like a larger zoom type lens, it's just not something I'm gonna use on a gimbal. It doesn't make a lot of sense because that's gonna really accentuate any of the harsher movements that happens, even if like the cameraman decides to do something unique or has to step over and really pull away from that centralized position that you're supposed to use with a gimbal. Now a couple things that are cool, upgraded with the a2000, because this is the same price range as the previous MGV2, and my expectation with a gimbal that's $600 plus is that it should have these kind of features. A really quick one that's really nice here is this stand that allows you to put this down when you're balancing and finicking around with a different camera maybe, or you're taking this one off. That's nice to have on a gimbal. And then 2, the adjustment, especially with sliding back, has latches. So as you push it back, it just goes through each interval. It's like millimeter intervals or so. And that's fantastic. Instead of this, you know, slight movements that you go a little bit too much pressure and then you have to keep going back and forth, you can go through each click. And that makes it a lot faster in the balancing. Same thing's true for each one of the balance changes by the gearing itself as far as working on the roll and the tilt. And I really like how smooth the controls are. They've kind of modified it where now they have a trigger control in the front for different commands, and they've got the classic function button in the back where you can do things like go into tilt mode, where now it's going to tilt down with me as I change where I want the camera to look, and then going right back to normal mode with panning. And you can also do a quick lock. If you have a subject or something you want to look at and you want to lock it there, and no matter where you move, it's going to stay locked in that position. That's a quick switch here too with the trigger key. So it's pretty cool to have that set up, and this seamlessly transitions to the expansion where you have the arms out. Now, that's more of a personal preference. The idea is that if you hold the gimbal with the expanded controls, it's supposed to be easier to hold for longer, but some people claim that's not true, and that's really up to personal preference. This way you can always switch between arms, you know, if you get tired and you want to switch over. That's kind of the pros people say with the single hand position, but I do think the double hand position is a lot more stable. As a side note, the video you saw, that was done with single hand mode. On the ground, all you have to do is just flip the camera upside down, And this does a very good job at just correlating right to that command without me having to turn it off like the previous model, right? And then you can go down to the floor and get some nice glide shots without having to get yourself crouching low. And this is actually great for cinematography, videography, or anything you're trying to do to get that particular look of like flying through maybe some corn, you know, some wheat, or going low to the grass and getting some nice bokeh in the background with that close-up shots. Just really cool things that you see and take for granted in movies and different productions that we can now do as amateurs, which is just awesome. As far as things that I don't care for, they did a great job with the screws and everything like that, but again, I'm waiting for that big evolution with gimbals where things are just easier to set up and switch between cameras. Almost like you could just set it on here and clip it. Kind of like tripods where you can just clip in and out. I'd like to see that for this as far as getting the camera position, but they want to make it an adjustment and a clip in at the same time, and that's why you have to slide the camera in and move it around. So it'd be nice if we had a way to go between a full frame and maybe a compact APS-C camera like that and the gimbal and get it measured. That's really the only negative I have, because for the price range, and I got flack for this in the last video calling this a budget gimbal. I guess your budget's your budget, right? But $600 plus is really kind of the minimum you're gonna go with gimbals to get something that's actually decently smooth. And honestly, if it's not completely smooth, if you can tell that there's a little shake still, I don't really understand the point of having the gimbal. Now what's beautiful is some of that video you saw, or all that video you saw, is combined with the best stabilization abilities out there with amateur technology. In the A7 III camera, that's got phenomenal onboard stabilization. So, you know, that's adding a lot to this. Even just walking with the camera itself, you get quite a bit of stability. But the gimbal gives it that extra bump where you can basically get those cinematic glide shots of someone walking, over the shoulder shots, whatever. So this gets a huge thumbs up from me, totally worth the money. Get the expansion pack. The expansion pack is only worth it if you need that. Otherwise, you're gonna have $200 worth of handlebars sitting in the corner you never use. And if you like single hand, if you know what single hand is like with gimbals, this is as good as it gets in my mind, especially for that price range. And if you like it with the handlebars, that's not too bad of a deal for $200 more. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions on the a2000, this gimbal, and its comparison to others. I might even compare it to a crane model. We'll see here. If there's interest in that, let me know. If you want to check this out and all its specs, I'll put it down in the links down below as far as in the comments and the description. And besides that, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you next time on Drive By Review.